My lazy parents crashed my house closing like they were invited to the party, demanding to be added to the deed of the first home I ever bought with my own money, so I made sure they'd never forget what boundaries look like. The conference room at the title company smelled like fresh coffee and new beginnings. I sat at the long mahogany table, my hands trembling slightly as I held the pen that would sign away 6 years of relentless saving, late nights, and sacrifices nobody in my family seemed to notice. The modest 3-bedroom Craftsman wasn't a mansion, but it was mine. Every single dollar of that down payment came from my own bank account, earned through double shifts at the hospital and freelance medical consulting work I squeezed into my weekends. Laura Martinez, my real estate agent, smiled at me from across the table. The closing attorney shuffled through papers with practiced efficiency. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned until the conference room door burst open with enough force to rattle the framed certificates on the wall. My mother Delilah swept in like she owned the building, my father Kenneth trailing behind her with his characteristic slouch. She wore a dress I'd seen her buy 3 months ago on a shopping trip funded by my brother's credit card, the one he'd maxed out trying to keep her happy. My father had actually combed his hair for once, though his shirt looked like he'd grabbed it from the laundry hamper. "We made it," Delilah announced, her voice carrying that particular tone of manufactured cheerfulness she used when she wanted something. Traffic was absolutely horrible coming from the house. "Kenneth, put the bag down over there." Laura's smile froze. The attorney glanced at me with raised eyebrows. I felt my stomach drop through the floor. "What are you doing here?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. Delilah looked at me like I'd asked why the sky was blue. "We're here for the closing, sweetheart. Did you really think we'd miss this moment? Our daughter buying her first house." Kenneth set down a worn duffel bag and pulled out a chair, settling into it with a satisfied grunt. "Nice place they've got here. Very professional." "You weren't invited," I said, finding my voice. "This is a private closing. How did you even know where to come?" My mother waved her hand dismissively, already pulling papers from her oversized purse. "Your brother mentioned it last week. We couldn't let you go through this alone, honey. Buying a house is such a big step. We wanted to be here to support you." Support. The word felt like acid in my mouth. These were the same parents who'd borrowed $3,000 from me 2 years ago for emergency car repairs and never paid back a cent. The same parents who'd guilt-tripped me into covering their mortgage payment 4 separate times while they took weekend trips to the casino. The same parents who'd raised my brother Timothy to believe the world owed him everything while I worked my way through nursing school with zero financial help. Laura cleared her throat. "I'm sorry, but this is indeed a private closing. Only the buyer and necessary parties are permitted to." "Oh, we're necessary all right," Delilah interrupted, pulling out a crumpled document. "We had our lawyer draw this up. Since we're family, we should be added to the deed. Just as co-owners with our daughter. It's the sensible thing to do." The room went silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. I stared at my mother, unable to process what she'd just said. The attorney's pen stopped mid-signature. Laura's mouth fell open. "Excuse me?" I finally said. Kenneth leaned back in his chair, looking pleased with himself. "It's smart planning, Natalie. If something happens to you, the house needs to stay in the family. Plus, your mother and I aren't getting any younger. We might need a place to stay someday. You want to be added to the deed of the house I bought with my own money," I repeated slowly, making sure I understood correctly. "The house you contributed absolutely nothing toward." Delilah's face shifted into that wounded expression she'd perfected over the years. "That's hurtful, honey. We raised you, didn't we? Fed you, clothed you, gave you a roof over your head for 18 years. I'd say we contributed plenty." Something inside me snapped. Maybe it was the years of watching them coast through life while I killed myself working. Maybe it was the memory of eating ramen noodles for months to save money while they upgraded to a bigger TV. Maybe it was simply the audacity of this moment, their absolute certainty that they deserved a piece of everything I earned. "Get out," I said quietly. "Natalie, don't be dramatic," my mother started. "Get out of this building right now, or I will call security and have you physically removed." My voice was steady, cold, completely unlike anything I'd ever used with them before. Kenneth stood up, his face reddening. "You're being disrespectful. We're your parents. You owe us." "I owe you nothing." I stood to, meeting his eyes. "I've paid for your mistakes, your emergencies, your luxuries more times than I can count. You've taken thousands of dollars from me and never returned a penny. And now you show up here, uninvited, demanding to be given ownership of something you didn't earn? Absolutely not." The attorney had quietly picked up his phone. Within minutes, building security arrived. My parents left, my mother crying loudly about ungrateful children, my father muttering threats about lawyers. The door closed behind them, and silence settled over the room like snow. "I'm so sorry about that," I said to everyone present, my hands shaking. Laura reached across the table and squeezed my arm. "Don't apologize. Let's get you into your house." The closing continued. I signed every paper with a sense of grim determination. When I received the keys to my new home, I held them so tight the metal bit into my palm. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. Over the next 2 weeks, my mother called me 37 times. I know the exact number because I stopped answering after the 5th call and let them all go to voicemail. Her messages started with tears and apologies, shifted to anger and accusations, then cycled back to guilt-tripping. My father sent text messages claiming I'd embarrassed them, damaged their reputation, broken their hearts. Timothy called me at work, furious. "Mom's been crying for days because of you. Do you know what you've done to her?" "I stopped them from stealing from me," I replied calmly. "If that upsets her, maybe she should examine her behavior. They just wanted to help. They wanted to be part of your success. They wanted free real estate, Timothy. There's a difference." He hung up on me. I wasn't surprised. My brother had been conditioned his entire life to see our parents as victims and himself as their protector. The fact that he was drowning in debt from funding their lifestyle never seemed to occur to him. The harassment escalated. My mother showed up at the hospital where I worked, crying in the parking lot until I agreed to speak with her. She begged me to reconsider adding them to the deed, explaining they'd already told their friends about the house and now looked foolish. She claimed my father's health was suffering from the stress. She promised they'd pay rent if I let them move into the 3rd bedroom. "The answer is no," I told her. "The answer will always be no. Stop asking." "You've changed," she said, her voice dripping with disappointment. "You used to be such a sweet girl. Now you're cold. Selfish." "I learned from watching you," I replied, then walked away. What my mother didn't know was that her parking lot ambush had been witnessed by 3 of my colleagues, including the head of my department. Dr. Patricia Mills called me into her office the following day, concern etched across her features. "I don't mean to pry into your personal life, but yesterday's incident in the parking lot has me worried. Is everything all right at home?" I explained the situation, keeping my voice level and professional. Dr. Mills listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from concern to understanding to something resembling anger on my behalf. "I had parents like that," she said when I finished. "They drained my first husband's bank account before I finally cut them off. It nearly destroyed my marriage." She leaned forward, her hands clasped on the desk. "You need to document everything. Every interaction, every phone call, every visit. If this escalates further, you'll want a paper trail." Her advice proved prescient. 2 days later, my mother called my supervisor directly, claiming I was having a mental health crisis and shouldn't be working. She spun an elaborate story about me being unstable, making rash decisions, and needing family intervention. My supervisor, thankfully, had already been briefed by Dr. Mills and saw right through the manipulation. "Your mother called today," she told me. "I wanted you to know, and I wanted you to know that I told her any further calls would be considered harassment and reported to hospital security." The realization that my mother would go so far as to jeopardize my career sent ice through my veins. This wasn't just about the house anymore. This was about control, about punishing me for defying them. I went home that evening and sat in my empty living room, surrounded by moving boxes I hadn't yet unpacked, and cried for the first time since the closing. But tears turned to resolve. I spent the next 3 hours going through my phone, my email, my bank records. I created a spreadsheet documenting every financial transaction with my parents dating back 8 years. The total came to $18,347.82. $18,000 I'd handed over, loaned, or been guilted into providing. Money for car repairs that never happened. Money for medical bills they'd actually paid with their insurance. Money for Timothy's college that he dropped out of after 1 semester. Money for a vacation they claimed was a mental health necessity. I added detailed notes to each entry, the excuse they'd given, whether repayment had been discussed, what actually happened to the money when I could verify it. The document grew to 6 pages. Seeing it all laid out in black and white made my stomach turn. My best friend Alicia came over that weekend to help me unpack. She found me surrounded by papers, my laptop open to the spreadsheet, my face probably reflecting the betrayal I felt. "Jesus. This is worse than you told me." I didn't realize how bad it was until I wrote it all down. I just kept giving, kept helping, kept believing them when they said it was the last time. Alicia picked up one of the printed bank statements, shaking her head. This one's from 3 years ago. $2,000 for emergency dental work. Did your dad even go to the dentist? He went to Atlantic City that weekend. Timothy posted photos on Facebook. I remember because I saw them while I was eating instant oatmeal for dinner so I could afford that month's rent. And you never said anything? What was I supposed to say? Hey, I can see you gambling with my money? They would have made me out to be the villain. Accused me of not trusting them. Thrown it in my face that they raised me. Alicia sat down beside me on the floor. You know this isn't normal, right? Normal parents don't bleed their kids dry financially. Normal parents don't show up at their kid's job trying to get them fired. I know. I've always known, I think. But knowing and accepting are different things. We spent the rest of the day unpacking boxes and talking. Alicia helped me see patterns I'd been too close to notice. How my parents' requests always came right after I'd mentioned doing well at work or saving money. How they'd used Timothy as a messenger when I started setting boundaries, knowing I'd feel guilty about upsetting my brother. How my mother's health crises aligned suspiciously with times I'd said no to them. They've been manipulating you your entire adult life, Alicia said bluntly. Probably longer. She was right. I thought back to high school, when I'd worked part-time at a grocery store. My mother had frequently borrowed money from my earnings, promising to pay me back. She never did. I remembered wanting to save for a school trip to Washington, D.C., but never having enough because my paychecks kept disappearing into the household budget, a budget that somehow had room for my father's cigarettes and my mother's monthly salon visits. In college, I'd taken out extra student loans thinking I needed them for expenses. Really, I'd needed them because my parents kept calling with emergencies that required money transfers. I graduated with an additional $12,000 in debt that had nothing to do with my education. The pattern was decades old. I'd just been too conditioned to see it. Monday morning brought another surprise. A certified letter arrived at the hospital addressed to me, sent by a law firm I didn't recognize. My hands shook as I opened it in the break room. The letter claimed that my parents had invested money in my education and upbringing with the implicit understanding that I would provide financial support in their retirement years. It cited various legal theories about familial obligation and suggested that my refusal to add them to my house deed constituted a breach of implied contract. The letter concluded with a demand that I either add them to the deed or pay them $50,000 in restitution for funds invested in my development. I read it 3 times, my disbelief growing with each pass. $50,000? For raising me. For doing the literal bare minimum required of parents by law. I called Garrett immediately. They're claiming you owe them money for being your parents? He said, and I could hear the incredulity in his voice. That's genuinely one of the most absurd things I've encountered, and I've been practicing law for 15 years. Can they do this? Is this legal? They can file whatever frivolous lawsuit they want. Will it go anywhere? Absolutely not. But they can waste everyone's time and money trying. He paused. Here's what concerns me. This letter is from Camden and Associates. They're not ambulance chasers. They're a moderately respected firm. Which means your parents either lied to them about the situation, or they somehow came up with money for a retainer. Where would they get that kind of money? That's an excellent question. My guess? They're using the proceeds from something. Maybe they refinanced their house, took out a loan, or liquidated assets. People do desperate things when they're trying to maintain control. I found out the answer that evening when Timothy called, his voice tight with anger. Did you really need to get lawyers involved? Now Mom and Dad are spending their retirement savings on legal fees. They're going to end up broke because of you. They hired the lawyer, Timothy. Not me. They sent me a legal threat demanding $50,000. Because you won't do the right thing. They just want security. They want to know they'll have a place to live if something happens. They have a place to live. The house they own. The one I helped pay the mortgage on multiple times. They took out a reverse mortgage on it last year. They're barely scraping by with the payments and the terms. The house is basically the bank's now. They're going to lose it if they can't keep up. And there it was. The real issue. Their house needed work they didn't want to pay for, so they decided mine should become theirs. The entitlement was staggering. Let me be very clear, I said, keeping my voice level. I will never add them to my deed. I will never give them money for home repairs. I will never again fund their lifestyle. If they want to spend their retirement savings on lawyers for a case they'll lose, that's their choice. But I'm done being their personal ATM. You're abandoning them. I'm establishing boundaries. There's a difference. And if you can't see that, if you can't see how they've used both of us, then you're not paying attention. Timothy hung up. I sat in my kitchen, in my house, and felt the weight of familial obligation trying to drag me back into old patterns. But something had shifted inside me. The closing day confrontation had cracked open a door, and now I could see clearly what had always been there: exploitation dressed up as family loyalty. That's when things accelerated beyond anything I could have anticipated. Within days of that phone conversation with Timothy, my parents made their move. Not through lawyers this time, but through Camden and Associates withdrawing from their case. I received a brief letter stating the firm no longer represented Kenneth and Delilah Morrison, effective immediately. No explanation given. Garrett called me when he received his copy. They either ran out of money or the lawyers figured out they'd been lied to. Either way, this is good news for you. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt uneasy. My parents weren't the type to simply give up when they wanted something. They'd regroup and try another angle. Over the next few weeks, I discovered just how far my parents were willing to go. My mother began calling my neighbors, introducing herself as a co-owner of my property and asking them to keep an eye on her investment. Mrs. Robertson, the retired teacher who lived 3 doors down, knocked on my door one Saturday morning looking confused. "Your mother came by yesterday," she said carefully. She was asking about the property lines and whether I'd noticed any maintenance issues. She said something about making sure the house was being properly cared for since she and your father had partial ownership. I felt my face flush with embarrassment and rage. She doesn't own any part of this house. She's lying. Mrs. Robertson's expression shifted to concern. I thought it seemed strange. She asked if she could have a spare key in case of emergencies. I told her she'd need to talk to you about that. Please don't give her anything. She's not welcome on this property. After Mrs. Robertson left, I called Garrett again. His advice was firm: send a cease and desist letter to both my parents and their attorney. Make it clear that any further contact, any further false claims of ownership, any further harassment would result in legal action for slander and harassment. The cease and desist went out on a Tuesday. By Thursday, my parents had responded, not through their lawyer, but by showing up at my house with a U-Haul truck. I came home from a shift at the hospital to find my father and Timothy unloading furniture onto my front lawn. Boxes, a sofa, a television, lamps, kitchen items, my parents' belongings spread across my property like an invasion force. "What the hell is this?" I demanded, getting out of my car. Kenneth didn't even look up from the box he was carrying. "Your mother and I are moving in. Since you won't add us to the deed, we figured we'd just establish residency. After 30 days, we'll have tenant rights." Timothy avoided my eyes, focusing intently on dragging a dresser down the truck's ramp. "You are not moving into my house. We're family," my father said, finally meeting my gaze. "You can't just leave us out on the street. The bank's foreclosing on our place next month. We've got nowhere else to go. You have options. Apartments. Rentals. Senior housing. Literally anywhere but here. We can't afford any of that. The reverse mortgage ate up all our equity. We thought we'd have more time, but the terms changed and now we're losing everything," he said it matter-of-factly, like their poor financial planning was somehow my emergency. "Figured we'd stay with you while we figure things out." I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. "What are you doing?" Timothy asked, alarm in his voice. "Calling the police. You're trespassing." My father laughed, actually laughed. "Trespassing? I'm your father. Tell her, Timothy. Tell her she's being ridiculous." Timothy looked between us, clearly uncomfortable. "Maybe we should just talk about this, Nat. They really did sell the house. They need somewhere to go. They can go to a hotel. They can go to an apartment. They can go literally anywhere that isn't my property." I spoke into the phone, giving the dispatcher my address and explaining the situation. The police arrived within 10 minutes. 2 officers, a man and a woman, listened as my father explained that he was simply trying to stay with his daughter during a housing transition. I showed them my deed, my mortgage documents, my cease and desist letter. I explained the months of harassment, the attempted deed fraud, the pattern of financial exploitation. The female officer, whose nameplate read Martinez, looked at my father with barely concealed disgust. "Sir, you need to remove your belongings from this property immediately. If you refuse, you'll be arrested for trespassing and criminal mischief. Criminal mischief? I'm her father. That doesn't give you the right to occupy someone else's property without permission, Officer Martinez said firmly. You have 30 minutes to clear this lawn. If you're not gone by then, you'll be taken into custody. My mother appeared then, emerging from the U-Haul's cab where she'd apparently been hiding. She immediately began crying, loud theatrical sobs designed to garner sympathy. Please, officers. We have nowhere to go. Our daughter has turned her back on us. We just need help. The male officer, whose nameplate read Foster, remained unmoved. Ma'am, your housing situation is not a police matter. What is a police matter is you attempting to illegally occupy someone else's residence. I suggest you start loading that truck back up. It took them 40 minutes, not 30, but eventually every piece of furniture, every box, was loaded back into the U-Haul. My parents left without another word, Timothy driving the truck while they followed behind in my father's old sedan. The officers stayed until they'd turned off my street. You did the right thing, Officer Martinez told me before leaving. I've seen situations like this before. Family members who think blood relation means automatic access to everything. It doesn't. Your property is yours. I thanked her, went inside, locked every door and window, and then sat on my empty living room floor and shook for an hour. The violation felt immense. They'd actually tried to move in. They'd sold their house, gambled everything on the assumption that I couldn't, refuse them. The next morning, I installed a security system. Cameras at every entrance, motion sensors, the works. The technician asked if I'd had a break-in. Something like that, I said. Alicia came over that night with wine and takeout. I told her everything while we sat on my back porch, the new security cameras visible from where we sat. They're escalating, she said. First the lawyer, now this. What's next? I don't know. But I'm documenting everything. I showed her my phone, where I'd started taking photos and videos of every incident. The U-Haul on my lawn. The pile of their belongings. The police talking to my father. Garrett says if they keep this up, I can get a restraining order. Maybe you should get one anyway. Before they try something else. She was right, but part of me still resisted. A restraining order against my own parents felt like crossing a line I couldn't uncross. It felt final in a way the cease and desist hadn't. That hesitation nearly proved costly. A week later, I woke up at 2 a.m. to my security alarm blaring. My phone showed someone at my back door trying to force it open. The camera revealed my father, clearly intoxicated based on his unsteady movements, jimmying at the lock with what looked like a screwdriver. I called 911 again, my voice surprisingly steady despite my racing heart. Then I called Garrett, waking him up, and told him to file for the restraining order immediately. While I waited for police, I watched through the camera feed as my father gave up on the back door and stumbled around to try the windows. This time, he was arrested. Breaking and entering, criminal trespassing, attempted burglary. He spent the night in jail. My mother called me 17 times before I blocked her number. Timothy sent a barrage of texts calling me every name he could think of, blaming me for destroying the family. I felt nothing. Or maybe I felt everything and it had overloaded my system into numbness. My father had tried to break into my house. The man who taught me to ride a bike, who'd taken me to my first day of school, had attempted to force his way into my home in the middle of the night. The restraining order was approved within 48 hours. Both parents, 200 feet minimum distance, no contact of any kind. Judge Morrison, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and sharp eyes, had reviewed all my documentation before making her ruling. In 30 years on the bench, I have seen many family disputes. What I see here is a clear pattern of financial exploitation and escalating harassment. This order will remain in effect for 1 year, at which point we can review whether an extension is necessary. My mother had cried in court. My father had sat stone-faced, his public defender whispering urgently in his ear. Timothy had glared at me from the gallery like I was a traitor. I walked out of that courthouse feeling lighter than I had in months. I changed tactics then. Instead of simply defending myself, I went on the offensive. I compiled every text message where they'd asked me for money, every bank transfer I'd made to their accounts, every broken promise to repay me. 8 years of documentation. Garrett helped me draft a formal demand letter for repayment of all loans, totaling $18,347.82. We sent it certified mail. My mother called me screaming within an hour of receiving it, violating the restraining order in her rage. I didn't answer. I saved the voicemail and sent it to Garrett, who forwarded it to the court. She was fined $500 for the violation. "You're actually trying to take money from your own parents?" She'd screamed into my voicemail. "We're on a fixed income. We have nothing. You have income from Dad's pension and your Social Security," I said. "That's more than fixed, it's guaranteed. You just spend it all on things you don't need. We're going to tell everyone what you've done. Everyone will know what kind of daughter you are." "Go ahead," I said simply. "Tell them. Tell them everything." She did. She called every aunt, uncle, and cousin in our extended family, painting me as a monster who'd abandoned her poor, struggling parents in their time of need. Some relatives believed her. They sent me messages expressing disappointment, calling me heartless. But I'd prepared for this too. I sent a group email to the same relatives, attaching screenshots of every financial transaction, every unanswered loan, every guilt trip. I included the document my parents had tried to present at the closing, showing they'd intended to claim ownership of my house. I laid out the truth in simple, unemotional terms. The responses were illuminating. My Aunt Rosemary called me directly. "I had no idea," she said quietly. "Your mother always made it sound like she was helping you out, not the other way around. I'm sorry I believed her without asking your side." Uncle Victor sent a text. "Your dad tried the same thing with me 10 years ago. I cut him off. You should too." My cousin Jessica wrote, "This explains so much about family gatherings. I always wondered why you looked exhausted around them." The tide shifted. My parents found themselves suddenly without their usual chorus of defenders. Some relatives stopped taking their calls. Others started asking pointed questions about the money they'd borrowed over the years. My mother tried one last manipulation. She showed up at my new house, my home, the place I'd specifically bought to get away from them, with a suitcase, claiming my father had kicked her out and she had nowhere else to go. I stood in the doorway, not letting her inside. "That's a lie. Dad would never kick you out. You staged this. Please, Natalie. I'm your mother. You can't turn me away. Watch me." I pulled out my phone and called my father. He answered on the second ring. "Is Delilah there?" I asked. "What?" "No," she said she was going to the grocery store." "Why?" "She's at my house with a suitcase claiming you kicked her out. I'm going to ask you directly, did you end your marriage?" Silence. Then, "Of course not. What the hell is she doing?" I put the phone on speaker. "You're on speaker now. Tell her to go home." My father's voice came through tinny but firm. "Delilah, get back here right now. This is ridiculous." My mother's face cycled through emotions: shock, anger, humiliation. She grabbed her suitcase and left without another word. I locked the door behind her and sat on my new couch in my new living room, shaking. I didn't speak to either of them for the full year the restraining order remained in effect. During that time, I focused on making my house a home. I painted the bedroom a soft gray. I planted flowers in the front yard. I hosted a housewarming party and invited friends who'd supported me through everything. Laura came, bringing an expensive bottle of wine. Garrett brought his wife and kids. To new beginnings, Laura toasted, raising her glass in my kitchen. To boundaries, I added, and everyone laughed. Timothy called me during the party. I stepped outside to answer, watching through the window as my friends laughed and talked. "Mom's in the hospital," he said without preamble. My heart jumped. "What happened?" "Anxiety attack. The doctor said it's from stress. This whole situation with you has been killing her." "I'm sorry she's unwell," I said carefully. "But her anxiety isn't my responsibility to manage, especially not by giving her access to my assets." "You're really not going to visit her?" "No, Timothy. I'm not." "You're a nurse. You're supposed to care about people." "I do care. That's why I'm not enabling destructive behavior anymore. She needs therapy, not another person to manipulate." He hung up. I went back inside to my party, to my people, to my life. My mother was released from the hospital the next day, perfectly fine. It had been another manipulation attempt, staged with Timothy's help. I found out later he'd been the one to call the ambulance, claiming she was having chest pains, when really she'd just been upset. The final confrontation came when the restraining order expired after 1 year. I received a letter from a different attorney, their third one, stating they were withdrawing all legal claims and would no longer contact me regarding the property or any financial matters. The letter was brief and professional, with none of the emotional manipulation I'd come to expect. I called Garrett. "What changed?" I made some inquiries, he said. Turns out Camden and Associates dropped them months ago when they couldn't pay. The second lawyer lasted 2 weeks. This third one probably explained they had no case whatsoever and were wasting what little money they have left. Reality finally caught up with them. Also, your father's facing probation for the break-in attempt. Any further harassment could land him in jail. They're finally backing down. So it's over? From a legal standpoint, yes. From a family standpoint? That's up to you. I thought about it for a long time. Part of me wanted reconciliation, wanted to believe my parents could change. But I'd spent too many years hoping for that, only to be disappointed repeatedly. Instead, I wrote them a letter. I explained that I loved them but could no longer have a relationship built on financial exploitation and manipulation. I outlined clear boundaries, no requests for money, no surprise visits, no expectations of access to my home or my finances. If they could respect those boundaries, we could potentially rebuild something. If not, I was prepared to maintain my distance indefinitely. I sent the letter and waited. Weeks passed with no response. Then, nearly 2 months later, a card arrived in the mail. It was a generic birthday card. My birthday was actually 4 months away, with a short note inside in my mother's handwriting. We understand. We're sorry. We miss you. It wasn't much. It didn't undo years of damage. But it was something. I put the card on my refrigerator and went about my life. My father called a few weeks after that, awkward and formal. We talked about the weather, about his garden, about nothing of consequence. He didn't ask for money. He didn't mention the house. After 15 minutes, he said goodbye and hung up. It felt like progress. My mother took longer to come around. Nearly 8 months passed after my father's first call before she reached out, sending a text message asking if we could meet for coffee. I agreed, choosing a neutral location and setting a 1-hour time limit in my mind. She looked older when I saw her, more tired. We sat across from each other in the coffee shop, the silence stretching between us. I've been going to therapy, she said finally. My doctor recommended it after the anxiety attacks. I've been talking about a lot of things. About how I grew up, about money, about you and Timothy. How's that going? I asked carefully. It's hard. I don't like what I'm learning about myself. She stirred her coffee, not meeting my eyes. My therapist says I have patterns. Entitlement. Manipulation. I didn't see it before. Or maybe I didn't want to see it. Those are difficult things to acknowledge. She asked me what I thought I deserved from you. I said you owed me for raising you. She asked what you got in return for all the money you gave us. I couldn't answer that. Delilah finally looked up at me. I took from you. For years. And I convinced myself I deserved it because I was your mother. I didn't know what to say. This was more self-awareness than I'd ever heard from her. I'm not asking you to forgive me, she continued. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying to understand what I did wrong. It might be too late, but I'm trying. We talked for an hour and a half. I told her about the house, about the renovations I'd done, about my life. She listened without interrupting, without asking for anything. When we parted, she hugged me briefly, and it felt different than before. Less demanding. More genuine. I don't know if my parents will truly change. People in their 60s rarely undergo complete transformations. But the harassment stopped. The financial demands ended. My mother continued therapy. My father started attending sessions with her. Timothy even apologized months later, admitting he'd been enabling them because it was easier than setting boundaries. My house became exactly what I'd hoped it would be, a sanctuary. I refinished the hardwood floors myself, learning through YouTube videos and trial and error. I turned the third bedroom into a home office where I could do my consulting work in peace. I adopted a dog from the shelter, a mixed breed named Jasper who greeted me at the door every day with unconditional enthusiasm. On the anniversary of my closing date, I threw myself a party. Just me, Jasper, and a really good bottle of champagne. I sat on my back porch, looking at my yard, my house, my accomplishment, and felt something I hadn't felt in years around the concept of family and home, peace. Laura stopped by that evening, having remembered the date. She brought cupcakes from the bakery downtown. 1 year in. How does it feel? She asked, settling into the porch chair beside me. Like I finally stopped running, I said. Like I can breathe. Your parents? We're working on it. Slowly. With very clear boundaries. Good for you. She raised her cupcake in a toast. To the woman who stood her ground. To the woman who learned when to stand and when to walk away, I corrected. The house wasn't just property. It was proof that I could build something for myself, protect it, and refuse to let anyone take it from me, not through guilt, not through manipulation, not through claims of family obligation. It was proof that I could love people and still say no to them. That I could honor my own needs without being selfish. That I could be both strong and compassionate. My parents never became the parents I'd wished for as a child. But through establishing boundaries and refusing to be exploited, I freed both them and myself from a toxic dynamic. They had to face their behavior. I had to release the fantasy that they'd magically change into different people. Sometimes I still get frustrated with them. My mother still occasionally makes comments that push boundaries, testing to see if I'll bend. My father still doesn't quite understand why I won't just let it go and pretend nothing happened. But I hold firm, and each time I do, it gets a little easier. The house closing they tried to crash became the closing of an old chapter in my life. The deed has my name on it, just my name. Every mortgage payment I make is a reminder that I'm capable, independent, and worthy of protecting what I've built. Every quiet evening in my living room is proof that peace is possible, even after chaos. I learned that family doesn't get unlimited access to your life simply because of biology. Love doesn't mean accepting abuse or exploitation. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is establish firm boundaries and refuse to cross them, no matter how much pressure you face. My house stands as a testament to those truths. Every wall, every window, every nail in the floor represents my refusal to be taken advantage of. It represents the moment I decided my own well-being mattered more than keeping the peace. It represents the life I built for myself, with my own hands and my own money, according to my own rules. And nobody, not my parents, not my brother, not anyone, can take that away from me.